Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Karol Skrzonski. I'll be your host tonight, and welcome to another episode of Loosely Coupled by Bridging the Gap. And tonight, as always, with a nice coffee at the desk, we're going to be diving into a very peculiar topic of identity. And identity, understood as architecture, and also a little bit about the identity crisis that's going on right now in the broad industry, not only IT industry, but I think quite broader at this moment. And to talk about this, we're having a very lovely sociotechnical architect with us tonight, Yao Xin. Yao Xin, welcome to the stream. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, coming from Copenhagen, is that right? I think that was that, right?
That's right. I live in Copenhagen.
Yeah. But historically from China, so
Yeah.
that's why the very difficult name with a very difficult pronunciation of all the lovely different sounds of I in Chinese. So,
Yeah. You actually said my name in the Chinese way. I appreciate that.
oh,
So you're
yeah.
giving me a
Well,
bit of that identity deja vu that I had a past that where I was called Yao Xin in honor of your family name. That's what we do. Yeah.
yeah. I tend to keep these things in my head. You told me once that was enough. but
I know you do.
but other than that, I could say ni hao.
Ni hao.
Okay, so talking about identity. Now, identity and IT is understood in so many ways, usually not from any perspective of psychology or related things, because we don't really like psychology in IT. Although I argue with people that psychology in IT is one of the most important things to make things actually work and actually adopt architecture, because without taking psychology into consideration, we'll have a lot of problems with making any changes anywhere. Uh, with identity, we talk about the identity of a user, identity of a system, identity of whatever else we're having to identify, authenticate, and authorize to access whatever services and data we're offering. But today we're not talking about that kind of identity. So, what kind of identity as architecture are we talking about today? So, what's the topic?
The topic is really our own identity. And so, just to, I think you led with a very lovely analogy to IT. When we define an object, an entity, an aggregate, whatever in software, we give this thing an identifier. And if we
Mm-hmm.
do it, if the thing has an identifier, it has a life cycle. But whatever properties the change for this thing we're working with in software, modeling in software, the identity, the identifier itself, tend not to change unless it's like a immutable object. We swap it out with a different one, but that's a technical detail. Coming to, and
Mm-hmm.
we model human beings, we model users, and external, internal, and even ourselves, engineer the same way, right? um, in a way, our identity has been really, really easy to work with. Both of us, we have a different life cycle, and we are two different kinds of identities, but we also have a shared one, which is software
True.
professional. We both have probably, I don't know your educational background, but I have taken the traditional computer science. I'm a computer scientist, and coming from really a it's kind of like yeah, just to say, when my son comes home and say, okay, mom, what should I say that you do? Before I became a right. So I have all these nouns. I'm a programmer, I am an architect, I am a consultant. And sometimes when I was in between jobs, it was just like, how do I explain that to my son? It's just like crisis. So without that noun, I don't know who I am. So we identify a lot with our craft, with what we do. And in a way, that's brought us, monetary success, right? It has been really affluent
Hmm.
to be a programmer. We've been in popular to hire, and we've been, the IT industry has really been riding an easy wave until recently. That we have this thing called Gen AI that is really disrupting us, and really that identity thing, which is who are we now? If
Sorry,
what we used to do is,
Shin.
yeah.
Sorry, but for some reason you became inaudible. As in something just switched and you became a lot quieter on your mic. Maybe the mic switched to a different channel
I
on your
really?
machine. Oh, now it's good.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's just because I need to be closer to my mic. Yeah,
Not
is that
sure
good?
what happened.
It's good?
Now it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure where I was. I was saying that it's not only this identifier, this social security number that we identify ourselves with as professionals, as people with
Yeah.
craft. We identify with a lot more things, what we are good at, how we are perceived, what is our status, what makes us proud, and what do we want to be perceived to be good at. And all that
Hmm.
is changing really fast at the moment. As a specialist, being having knowledge, having a particular coding skill, having a analysis skill, having the skill to model software, all that is being challenged. We're sort of moving between to say, okay, am I still safe? One of the things about identity is that thing that makes us feel safe and powerful as
Right.
beings. Yeah, and that powerfulness is not always a constant state for us. If it's a life cycle, I think our life cycle is coming to kind of a junction point where we need to do a little bit of a review. And that review is sometimes we don't have time to do because there's so many things happening. How is it for you? How is it hitting you? I feel like I'm a very sensitive, super sensitive person. So I work with this. I do AI transformation consulting. I lead a lot of these big transition projects. And I feel that in almost all my meetings and workshops, even though some of these topics are undiscussable, how is it going on your side? Am I just being super sensitive?
Uh, I think there's a lot because now I'm looking at identity. If I'm looking at it from, for example, a pop culture perspective, people have this midlife crisis, for example, right? And that's an identity crisis, basically. Who am I? Where I'm going? What I'm doing? I think I had several of these already in my life, given various circumstances. So I'm kind of like very at ease with having an identity crisis. So I'm not really hit by anything related to the current shape of the industry. It's like my identity actually feels even stronger than ever in that sense. As a specialist, as an integration architect, as a trainer, uh, etc. But then I look at this like, okay, what is my identity? And I look at what were the values, for example, of my parents and how they identified themselves through mostly through work, and the values that were like printed in were your title and your salary. That was like kind of like the default setting. Then my generation, looking at my friends, colleagues, etc., started like going, no, 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 no. Title and salary, that's not the end of the world. That's just means to actually have other things in life. So they have plenty of other values, aspects, let's say sub identities. So they do not identify themselves with their job per se, but they identify themselves as them with certain different aspects, personas or whatever, uh, within their own identity. So for me, for example, one of these identities, these aspects, is being a father. Another one being a fire dancer juggler. I used to do that semi-professionally. Also, being a clown, I used to paint my face and entertain kids. Still do that with balloons. I just don't paint my face and wear a clown costume because, well, I don't have one anymore. Uh, and so on and so forth. And I do see people at my clients or in my consulting company that do have, or just on LinkedIn, that do have an identity crisis because but their crisis is mostly around, well, they're extremely scared. That's the whole crisis because I think human beings psychologically love certainty and they want to be in control, and that's an illusion. And the sooner we realize that and get a grip on that this is an illusion and we cannot control everything, then the healthier it is. But a lot of people just have this need for control, and then what's happening currently in the industry is a complete lack of control. Right? We have zero control over the direction the companies will take that we work at. We have zero control over whether they're going to decide to fire, hire, retain the workforce. We have zero control over what new, crazy at times ideas they're going to try to implement and how they will backfire. Because given the crazy ideas, especially around AI, we already see a lot of projects just backfiring at the companies. What was that? There was a case where a company decided to replace the whole call center with an AI IVR. Well, that went peachy. They rehired everybody soon after because the quality of customer care just dropped so low that nobody wanted to buy things from them anymore, right? So if people are identifying themselves with the job they do, I believe we have a serious crisis of identity at hand. If people manage to learn to disassociate themselves from the job title, they're probably better off. And
Mm.
basically, I meet a mix of these kind of people. Those that associate themselves with the profession very, very actively. Others that, yeah, I have a life after work. That's just to get the bills paid, right? Uh, it differs. But
Yeah, for sure.
definitely a crisis is there in many forms.
Yes, I definitely see that, and it also, like you mentioned, it depends on where in your life you yourselves are. Are you just a graduate, just joining the software industry? Have you been working with the industry for a while? Do you have to remodel your skill set to and where is it going? Right now, it's all shades of gray. But one thing that is about this control you mentioned, I feel it's maybe in our evolutionary history, uh, that to try to be in control has ha, has always been a need, a human need, as a
Yeah,
small, as even in the hunter-gatherer society, you want to be in control of your safety, and you want to be in control in a way that your tribe sees you, and if there is a danger, you can be grabbed, and you want to be in control in the sense that your sensing ability, your like your you will be able to sense danger, and then you'll be able to react. All that is about control. And if I think about why did I choose this line of work, I think if I recall, when I was like in my 20s, when I started to go into computer science, one of the things that really drew me into this line of work is that I would be in total control, like coding,
yeah,
having a compiler that checks things, and it's all those. One time we even joked about, we study computer science to not to have to deal with other people, because then everything we encode, we can be in total control of, right? We do
yeah,
TDD and whatever later on. It's everything even today with the harness engineering, with all this monitoring, with the dashboards and all this, the whole industry is about
We're in
control.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think control is not a bad thing, uh, but it's actually probably a signal for our primal need. One of our survival mode is actually to be in control. But what can we be in control of? I think that has been also been, in a way, we are heavily influenced by the industrial age. So in many
Mm.
ways, we see ourselves as a production factor, as as programmers, just like to produce a car, you need metal, and you need the interior, and you need all kinds of components, and to produce a piece of software, we are a production factor. And so far, what is
Yeah.
code? Code has been instructions for the machines, and we are sort of that that link, that
Instructor.
middle link, right? We make those
Yeah.
instructions, and all of a sudden, all those specialists, having knowledge, specialist knowledge. It used to be the product owners coming to a programmer and say, okay, this is what I want to change, and then yeah, I'll give me a user story. I Then don't bother me. I give me a couple of sprints or one sprint. You get what you want, and that's kind of, we are in power, in control that way, and that kind of control seems to be provide going away from us. And so
Hmm.
and in a way, we have to think about, if who are we when the machine, when AI learns our craft, the specialist craft, in terms of giving instructions to the machines, in terms of producing the code, and for those of us who are still thinking of ourselves as a production factor, we probably need to do some rethinking in order to feel safe again in our production trade. That's
The
Yeah.
two things that come to mind uh, is, first of all, the control. The aspect of having control is, it has a other underlying aspect here in coding, in programming, because it's not only about that sensation of control, it's also about the sensation of immediate gratification. When you code and you deploy your software, you run your software, you instantly know that it worked or didn't, right? So you have instant gratification when it does. While in a majority of things we do with life, we don't have instant gratification. We usually have to wait a while to get that gratification. We need to invest, then wait, do things, and then that gratification comes after. It's the long game, right? Where a lot of people, and especially in IT, they really do not like delayed gratification. So I'm guessing if we put a bunch of developers, architects in the room, and give them the candy experiment. You give them one candy, and if you go out the room, promise them the second candy if they don't eat the first one. I'm guessing most of them would probably fail at getting the second candy, right? Because that instant gratification is something we follow. Then the second thing that comes to mind, which is something I personally struggled with for years, was a sense of belonging. Because you mentioned that's the kind of, the primal hunter-gatherer need, that to be in control, to be like the tribe leader, etc. Then if somebody is tribe leader, then the chieftain or whatnot, then the rest of the tribe, they have a sense of belonging to the tribe, right? So we have a sense of belonging to our profession, a sense of belonging to our company, to our unit in the company, whatever that may be. And that is a big thing identity wise. The moment we start limiting the number of people and replacing that with AI agents, LLMs, Gen AI, whatever that may be, we're kind of dismantling that sense of belonging, because now we have a specialist that is surrounded by all sorts of chatbots and other things, and there's no humanity in that per se. And then on the notion of, well, you're right that we mostly treat developers as a factory. And I hate that term because I've seen that in consulting all the time. We're going to set up a factory and it's going to be like, oh yeah, industrial line. Software really doesn't work that way in terms of if you want to actually facilitate good software. You cannot industrialize that into a production line because then you're making faulty software most of the times. So if somebody is just a coder, yeah, that works. Yeah, just put them on a linear task, code this, move on, code this, move on, code this, move on. If somebody is and that's a very easily replaceable skill nowadays, if you're just a coder. But if you're a developer, engineer, yeah, and you actually have to put in thought into what you're doing. So actually, in this case, translating the intent into code. Then coding, writing the program, writing it, is only a small part of the whole process. And that other part is that, I believe that is that sociotechnical part, very context-rich part, that no piece of software will be able to imitate for a long time. Because that requires so much knowledge and so much understanding that is not quantifiable, not something you can write down precisely, because that's the field, that's the assumed context, because every one of us assumes context, because that's the human nature. We assume that when we're talking about using the same words, that we mean those, we understand the meaning of those words the same, etc. That's we're now in a context of identity architecture, right? Whatever that would mean. But for example, may have a similar understanding of the identity architecture, but then somebody watching right now might have a completely different understanding of a term of identity architecture, and then we're going to have a bit of a problem, right, in terms of cohesion. And all of these are all those various factors around that identity. What is our actual identity? Because if our identity is just to write code based on Jira tickets, that's a crisis right now. Not even coming soon. It's right now.
In that
If
sense,
our identity is beyond that, then
so from that perspective, maybe this change we have been confronted with because of the Gen AI is not a bad thing, because these gaps existed before AI, and
oh yeah,
the production line, the assembly line of work, despite the adoption of agile methodology, it long lived. It still does in many places. And so you mentioned belonging, and you mentioned context, and your podcast is called Loosely Coupled. I think it's a time, maybe it's an opportunity for us to rethink how which role do we play in coupling ourselves to the world, to the reality that we are part of. That that mechanistic model, the production line model, that somebody asks us to contribute with our resources, and they define what we do, and the business people figure out, and the architects work out some high level integration, and then we get these small chunks, and that's sometimes what we do, and we are happy about our contribution. We go home and we're happy with our kids. That's one way of
yeah,
coupling ourselves to the world, and nothing wrong with that. And just like,
true.
in 18th century, when when the locomotive has just been invented, and some of those mechanistic work, somebody has to do it. And before Gen AI, except for programmers, nobody could really translate the natural language to the machine language. Somebody had to do that. Just like, you have to do kind of a punch cards or whatever in the past to the machine, so that you can do that sort
Yeah.
of a translation. The translator role had to be taken by someone. That's one way of coupling ourselves to the world. And we could feel coherent, we could feel cohesion, our life is hanging together. That era seems to be leaving us right now, right? So, and for
Indeed.
instance, yeah. So if it hadn't hit us that we needed each other to succeed, we needed to integrate ourselves with each other. Your integration architect, if we just use this metaphorically, to
Yeah.
what extent have we needed each other to succeed up until now? I would say in some companies, people have either because of the cultural baggage or because of the company constraints, they have preferred to be, I have our own bubble, my own bubble. Just let me do my work in isolation. Tell me what to do, and once in a while, I would do refinement. I would do sprint planning. I would integrate my work with the others, but I don't have to really talk about these ambiguous things with each other. That can be taken care of by the managers, by the product owners. That's one way of coupling our understanding about the world. Uh, 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 but that era is also leaving us because
True.
unless, like you said, the world is complex. If we have to do these complex work together, if AI is accelerating the code generation, the harness generation, the integration setup, the infrastructure is with such a high speed and the quantity of code and with interfaces we're not familiar with, then we really do need to talk with each other to have a shared understanding of what is going on, what is happening around me, because otherwise the cohesion is gone. Without the coupling, the cohesion will be gone. So we have to really integrate ourselves with each other, and that's very uncomfortable for a lot of the geeks, which I mean, being female, I've also had my isolationist trait, but I see a lot of people feeling that now I have to talk with other people now to really figure out what's going on around us. And
Yeah.
that's really deeply, deeply unsettling. So I think the coupling bit, we are compelled to do more coupling between this isolated biological, psychological, cognitive identity with the world in a different way. And that's scary.
I think what the scary part is that also for a lot of people is that the mindset needs to shift very violently, very quickly, uh, and a lot of people are not ready for that. That's a very steep learning curve at the moment, because first of all, now okay, the shift is from coding to actually understanding what has been produced and verifying was that produced for the right intent,
Oh,
which
what
is a
needs to be
horrendous thing.
produced? That's, yeah.
Well, now we produce lines of code at a light speed, right? So basically, now how we validate that is that actually accurate to the actual intent, right? So that's PR reviews is now the biggest nightmare of the job everywhere. Everywhere where you use AI, at least, because, for example, in integration, we still don't have tools with that are good enough with AI to actually make that a problem. So that still is a very human task to be done. But the shift that is experiencing, and I just saw a post from Gregor Hope recently on that. The shift is from thinking structurally into thinking in behavior, and to think in the behavior, we need to talk to each other, because we cannot understand behavior by pure observation, because pure observation in IT cannot really happen on behavior, because that behavior is printed into us, right? Not into software. That software just facilitates for that behavior. So now we need to talk to each other to actually discuss what behavior are we expecting, what do we want from our software, what do we want to convey as intent for the software, how we want the user to behave, or what behaviors we want to support, etc., etc., etc. And I'm very happy to be an integration architect at this point because I'm already accustomed to that thinking. Because as an integration architect, I'm thinking in behavior because I'm designing behavior between systems. So for me, that's not a transition. That's the default. So that's the easy part for me. But I see a lot of people really struggling. They were thinking classes of code, data structures, algorithms, deployables as a structure, how we structure software into modules. Uh, and now they have to think, okay, but how does that cohesively behave? And how do we behave as specialists as well? Because then now we have more and more distribution. Even the development life cycle is even more distributed. So now we need to communicate more. The more distributed the system is, the more integrations you need to make there, right? The more distributed our software development lifecycle is, the more interactions between humans you need to have so that you actually output something that has value. And I still remember my colleagues after just as a junior developer, they were exactly saying what you said already. I didn't go into computer science to talk to people. They had the notion of sitting somewhere in a windowless basement, just in front of the screen and just pushing keys, right? That was their notion of being a programmer. That for me, that became a very false notion very early on because of my specialization. But they had to progress into it over the last few years, anyways. There's no possibility they would be sitting in the basement just coding. Somebody would just drop a ticket through a pipe, like the tube vacuum tubes, like a ticket arrived. No, that doesn't work like that at all. Maybe 20 years ago that was feasible.
Yeah, yeah,
Now,
for
not
sure.
really.
And I have a lot of compassion for those people. Until 2.5, 3 years ago, I worked in a very big Scandinavian bank. And I worked for extensive periods of time with developers who were struggling, really struggling with finding the conceptual language to really, doing what we do in domain-driven design. That was very, very hard for people. I think at that time I developed a very, very deep sense of compassion for people for whom language is not a second nature. It's just, to speak really rigorously and to empathize with the user needs and to articulate the whole pipeline from user needs to strategy to hypothesis building to theory building to an experiment I'm doing. That whole setup is so foreign to a lot of people. And
Yeah,
I think right now what we're facing, this call it crisis or call it an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for us to re with a little bit of a delay for a lot of people, our social capacity. So why do I call identity an architecture? That's because in architecture we do divide and conquer. We do it's an organizing principle for how things fit together. So the first part, if we talk about, let's just say we're limiting the scope, modeling scope to our professional identity. I'm not talking about
hmm
midlife crisis. I'm not talking about
yeah,
divorces, loss of parent, serious diseases, and those can all trigger identity crisis, right? So,
of course.
yeah. But let's limit the scope to professional identity, and maybe even in the context of this disruptive wave that's been created by Gen AI and in our industry. So the way I see our identity being composed of it's if you can imagine three like a Venn diagram with three circles. The first one I think that's the one we've been talking about. That's our craft. You know, what do I know? What do I know as a specialist knowledge? What is my role, right? Am I a programmer, architect, product owner, integration architect? And what is my craft? How do I make money? How
Hmm.
do I make a living, right? What do I tell people? What is my title? What is on my LinkedIn profile? That is I call it my capability or my craft. That's the first C.
Hmm.
The second C we've also been talking about. That is my capacity. So by capacity, I think it's a sort of a the capacity for having an impact. I do a lot of, you could be producing a lot of things, but even in the pre-AI age, some people, I would argue, I've seen that, could feel I had no impact. I just do my work. Reorg after reorg. I know some new organization would happen, but I don't have an impact. But so do I have the capacity? Do I have the impact? Secondly, am I do I feel connected with the big picture, with my team, with my company? Do I feel safe and coherent in that space, right? And most importantly, who is my support system? And in that sense, my capacity for making an impact is directly related to who's my tribe, is it my team, is it the people who have the same profession as me? So that's my capacity. And that there's a difference between my capability and my capacity, right? I could be a top-notch programmer and making zero impact, and I could be a mediocre programmer, but I could be having a lot of difference. For some reason, I'm just
Hmm.
really, I have this impactful role, and I'm making a lot of difference, and I feel connected. And
Yeah.
the third C would be my core, and that is unique for all of us. In my core, if you think about the core, if I do a lot of yoga, so in my core, that's your safety net. Do you feel safe? And also our recreational organs, right? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? So what is the level of enjoyment? That's also happening in the core. You have a gut feeling. Do I like this? Do I feel safe? And thirdly, am I living the life I want? So every one of us has this unique configuration for what is it? What is my unique talent I can bring to the world? And it doesn't have to be one, right? But it's unique to each of us. And I think in
Yeah.
this right now, the core part, a lot of us can't get into contact with that because what's happening at the capability and the capacity level is so overwhelming. We don't dare asking ourselves the question, am I enjoying this? Oh my God, that must be a question I can postpone when I have dealt with this current thing that I'm doing. So let me just have a glass of wine. Let me not think about those. So I think if we want to thrive and not just survive as software professionals and as product professionals, agile professionals, design professionals, we have to think all those three C's and we have to do it together. And
Mm.
I'm not like trying to lecture. I ask for people's charity, and this thing is still like the leading edge of my work. But I just feel that there is so much going on in social media, like so many podcasts, so many newsletters, so many course offerings, just to say, just
Everybody's doing something, right?
this is just the fear-based marketing. If you want to survive, you have to sign up for this particular AI course, this architecture cohort,
Yeah.
this that, and if you don't do that, you're gonna fail. This is gonna make or break you. So it's the fear. It's just like we're not dealing with our core. So it's just like, I tend to say the capability is kind of like our head. We live from the neck above, and the capacity it requires we open our heart. It's a heart thing. It's an open body position. If I want to connect with you, Carol, I can't do this. If I'm doing this, we're not connected. If I want to connect with you, I'm in an open receiving an heartful position, and then our gut feeling we tend to suppress it. And I see it
Yeah.
even yesterday when I was talking with the client's team. I could feel so much like people don't dare say, I don't get it. I but like the I won't say the client's name, but the manager was like saying, "Yeah, you see, I got the AI to help me. This is the documentation about what we have to do." He's very excited, and this is a, it's a very long ride, and some people are just like, "Huh?" But nobody wants to poke it. Nobody wants to go into the unsafe zone and say, "Oh, I don't get it." Maybe I'm the only one not getting it. That's what I call the
Yeah.
undiscussable, right? So I think a lot of that is happening as well with our identity. And no wonder we don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. There are many things I haven't said openly to a lot of clients, and I have my own shame about it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But you see, I think one of the aspects here that are the key problems, you mentioned, well, you have the free Cs, right? The free, let's say, areas. I feel that, as I mentioned before, a lot of people mistake their craft for their core.
Yeah.
The moment their craft becomes irrelevant to some extent, not fully, because it's never fully, but their knowledge becomes irrelevant because it's superseded by, let's say, AI in this case, then there is crisis because they have no idea what their core is, because they mistook their craft for their core and they treat their craft as their core, and now they're screwed because they have no idea where they are, and their identity is completely disrupted. And that then turns into the lack of psychological safety, that turns into lack of connection to the tribe, so that overlap of the craft and capability, I suppose, capacity, right? And then it impacts really everything. We literally, on the first episode of Loosely Coupled, when I started this channel and this live stream, we were talking. I was my guest was Fran Mendes, the creator of Async API, and we were talking about adoption of event-driven architecture at organizations, how what it takes to adopt event-driven approaches, because most organizations think in transactional behavior. And in the middle of the stream, we started talking about psychological safety as an adoption factor. So if we want to progress anywhere, we need to build psychological safety. That psychological safety nowadays is completely disrupted. People have no idea what's going to happen. There are, layoffs going around. People hear about these huge layoffs at these, tech giants. People are literally scared. They don't know if what they provide is enough value, if that capacity is valued. They may feel like their capacity is valued. They actually provide impact, or maybe feel like they don't provide impact because the requirements are changing 4 times in 1 week. It's very hard to feel that you're providing impact when your requirements are floating all the time. But even if you feel like you're providing that impact, that you're at an impactful place in the organization, you have no idea if that impact is valued,
Mm.
and that becomes another layer of that crisis entirely, right? So we're at a stage where a lot of people live in fear because they have no idea what's going on and what's going to happen. And then on top of that, the lack of connection to said core, that doesn't help. I used to be in that place. I mean, I used to have that way of thinking. Took a lot of therapy to get that sorted, but that my craft is my core. No, it isn't, and it never will be. I love my profession. I love what I do as a professional, but that's not who I am. That's only one aspect of me. And that's now, the older I get, the more vivid it is, the more I understand that this is just an aspect of my identity rather than my identity itself. But for a lot of people, when that's all they're doing at the moment, I mean, when I was a junior architect, I remember I was doing so much overtime at work that in the first quarter of the year, I exceeded the yearly legal limit of overtime, right? So it's like, that was my identity at the time. I literally took my craft as my identity. I didn't have life after work. I was playing video games. That's all there was, right?
That was life.
That was life. Yeah, I didn't have a family. I had enough money to buy myself video games, to feed myself, to hire somebody to clean my apartment. Perfect. I can sit down, play video games, go to the pub with friends once in a while, go do some juggling, fire dancing.
Nothing wrong with that. I love my identity in video games, by the way. It's much easier.
Very so true. I mean, I look at my Steam library and I'm like, oh, that's too many games there. But that's another story. I could literally sit down and stream games for a living. That probably would be more profitable than this live stream. But this is for the fun, not for the monetary gains.
I've totally been through where you were as well when I was earlier in my career. The overtime thing.
I think a lot of people in IT had this kind of notion, right? And then a lot of other aspects happen, like we're being very sure of ourselves in what we do and how we do it, and that we're right. And I know it's disproved, but we fall into that Dunning-Kruger effect, and we fall into the valley of despair. And it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm stupid. It's just like now the learning starts, right? And so on and so forth. And we're always ignorant about something. That's just the truth of it. Now, the question is, what are the circumstances? And right now, the circumstances to be ignorant are very painful, I would say, with how our craft is being replaced by certain things. I think, there is a lot of truth to it with the AI, that we are not going to be superseded by AI, but by people actually knowing how to use AI, leverage AI at their work. I think that's very true. Even all the big AI companies are now saying, use AI to augment, not to replace. They were like, a year ago, AI will replace Java developers in half a year. Nope, now they're changing the tune. Use AI to augment your work, not to replace Java developers. Yes, because we learned so much that it cannot do that to an extent.
Yeah.
But all the media and everything, and that was an observation I did quite a long time ago. I stopped watching TV entirely. Because watching TV, especially the news, was completely depressing. Because it was not about the aspect of knowing things. It was about the aspect that the things that sell the best in TV are the horror stories, are the dramas, are the problems highlighted, for example, in the news. And it creates that kind of false sense of the world is going down the shithole or something like that, right? The world is now very scared because now we're surrounded by AI. No, we're literally not surrounded by AI. We still have our computers that are very not AI. Okay, we have AI kind of things, miniatures in our phones. Yeah, sure. Siri using Gemini. All Android phones having Gemini on it anyways, etc. Oh, okay. But basically what we do in the world is not AI driven. You go to the shop, where's that AI? Where's that scary AI there, right? No, it's not. But because we're so embedded in that instant gratification of social media, etc., then we see that AI everywhere. And then the small percent of people actually posting, they post about whatever is currently the fame. And we have so many of those AI specialists that self-named specialists. And that seems scary, but that's overflow of just trashy information, not factual information, not statistical relevance. But because, let's say, in social media, 99% of consumers of social media are passive consumers, not the people posting,
Mm.
then it may seem that that 1% is the 100%. Most people that are actually using AI are actually in the like 10% of the world, going forward. That most of the world doesn't really use AI neither effectively nor efficiently, and they're perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's just like the blind scholars and the elephants. There are as many attitudes about AI as the number of scholars, and oh yeah, it's doing the boring work, so I can do the more creative and the more productive, and
Ooh.
or it's replacing me. I have no future. It's very. It can be very polarized. Even
Uh,
in this, yeah, go ahead.
have you, on that note, have you seen the post from Dr. Laura Weiss? She's been studying a lot of aspects of AI
I think
adoption,
yeah,
etc.
I just sent a LinkedIn invite to her. I'm not sure which,
Oh,
I'm just not sure which post her name.
one of the very old ones about AI adoption was that we were promised that AI will help us do the hard parts, right? And that we will work less. That was the general promise a few years back about, well, generative AI, etc. The reality of it was that the AI took the easy tasks out. We didn't adjust our work schedule. So, from the perspective of cognitive load, we now are more burdened with cognitive load than before because our brain used to relax over the easy tasks so we can have capacity to tackle the bigger tasks. Now over the we still work 8 hours, and now over these 8 hours we spend a lot more time tackling the hard tasks that require a lot more cognitive load, a lot more thinking, a lot more attention. So they exhaust us more than we used to when we still work 8 hours and we do harder things. So AI didn't help us at all. It actually made us more miserable. And there's this overflowing trend of people slowly zombifying, like being burnt out just from the sheer cognitive load. And that's
Yeah,
an amazing study already there. It's like, okay, that's a thing. Because I've been studying cognitive load for a moment there, because that's another aspect of architecture that we need to consider, right? It was like, oh, this actually makes sense now. It's like it's a difficult thing. Another difficult thing into ways of working, into accounting for what we actually do. Do we have that space in the day to actually let our brain relax so we can actually have that capacity to deal with things? And that's another aspect of our identity. Do we let ourselves relax? Do we value rest? And a lot of people, especially that are have this workaholic trait, they do not value rest. Being idle, sitting down on the couch, is like the biggest offense. It's
yeah.
it's
The
it is another thing in the identity.
on the REST note, we do RESTful API, but we don't have a RESTful attitude to our work life. Everything consumed needs metabolizing and needs digesting. We can't just consume more and more and more and expecting ourselves not to be tired. We are biological beings.
Yeah.
And I think one of the people whom I respect a lot is Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli historian. He
Mhm.
basically made the point that AI, machines don't get tired, but we do. So when we make machines to do those algorithms in the name of engagement, engagement is a positive thing, right? You engage your users, you hook them on and you make them constantly engaged. But we are not meant to be, our biological bodies are not meant to be.
Constantly engaged.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really not. a human thing not to think about rest. The other thing is that we think about change as something. If we all talk about change as being a constant, and one attitude we expect about change is that, once there is a change, I need to know what to do next. But I think there's a difference between change and transition. Change is an
Oh yeah.
event. Mostly it's an external event. Sometimes it's internal, like I don't know, I had a revelation, a family crisis, whatever, and some internal process. But right now, the crisis we're facing is kind of like, for most of us, it's externally triggered. And we need an internal, so the transition is an internal reorientation. It involves rest, it involves integration, it involves digestion, involves metabolizing. And that's not a waterfall. It's not like, okay, I've done my
No.
integration, I've done my restful thing today, now I'm ready for the next stop. It For every interaction, for every 2 hours intensive whatever coding and swarm and whatever, you need to I need to slow down and say, okay, what did
And
I
digest.
create? What did I create in those 2 hours? And
Yeah.
and basically clear my capacity a little bit for the next step. And so I think a lot of people, like I had this workshop the other day and people were like having sarcastic jokes about, oh yeah, we have now all been upgraded to middle managers, reviewers, harness engineers, orchestrators, and shepherds of AI herds, and it's a promotion, and a lot of people are like saying that's their way of saying we didn't sign up for this, but
Yeah.
that job is exhausting. Like not
It
creating,
is.
but only supervising. That that's really an exhausting job, and we need to have a lot more awareness about our bodies. It has to be an embodied. I think it needs to be an embodied process instead of only happening here above my head.
Yeah. To make it actually to digest it and internalize it. Yeah. And to that extent, a few points. I find it extremely ironic that you mentioned RESTful APIs, uh, because on the notion of rest, a large number of people have no idea how to rest, and on the notion of RESTful APIs, a significant amount of people have no idea what a RESTful API is because they never read Roy Fielding's dissertation. So they have no idea that it has nothing to do with JSON or HTTP verbs. So it's like, that already sounds really ironic, right? It's like, yeah, we try to rest, we have no idea how to rest. We do RESTful APIs, but we don't know what a RESTful API is. So that's like kind of the notion. That reminds me of my conversations with Mark Richards at times over how we digest information, how we work as researchers. Because of course, Mark being a book author, he does his research, he does a lot of thinking. That's knowledge work. That's very different than designing software. In essence, that's a lot heavier cognitive load because you need to have that knowledge to make a cohesive sense, right? And I do the same because I do a lot of research, especially over the last 3 years. My pipeline of research is only growing. And I remember this conversation that how to solve problems, that we're thinking about constantly some concepts of architecture, etc., and we're solving problems. And for Mark, it's like, oh, I'm not taking a shower in the morning. I'm going to take it midday because that's the break where I can internalize and like have my eureka moment because I go into the shower, just change the context entirely. This is the moment where you get to feel your body, you get to internalize, you get to make that connection between the head, heart, and body, the head, heart, and core. For me, accidentally, now I'm looking for my puppy, but he's not here. He's actually downstairs. It's like I go out with my dog about 2 to 3 times a day, and just having that walk is that moment where I actually internalize all these processes of heavy thinking that I did, and then I have a a moment, for example, to grab a phone and call somebody and just talk through it, or talk through the emotions associated with those findings, these elements that I just completed or whatever. And it's a process that just happened naturally and evolved because I have a puppy now. But basically, I realized I've been actually missing that kind of process, and it actually helps me to digest all these things that are happening and I'm doing. And there's plenty of things happening, basically, right? We move faster and faster, so that makes it a lot more things on my plate to deal with every day. But it's that connection is missing for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I, in a lot of ways, I feel that we are doing a lot of so we this in the West. I'm kind of like in between the Western and Eastern culture. The Eastern culture, where I came from, is a lot more collective, a lot more tribal. Well, in the good way,
True.
supportive way. Yeah, not like my tribe is better than yours kind of way. But the Western culture is extremely individualistic. If you can't really work out your shit together, and that's your own fault. You don't have the right. You didn't have. You didn't learn fast enough. You didn't get to read the right books, and you hang out with the wrong people. It's like you are accountable for all the misery that you are in, and therefore also, if on the flip side, people are really keen on having these status symbols, like want to be perceived as capable, competent,
Yeah.
productive, and that is in a way a kind of a pacifier, like ego. I say ego in the good sense of the word, to say this makes me feel good about myself. But in a way, we are not supposed to deal with this on our own. Like, uh, we
Yeah.
have always been a tribe. So, like, there is no psychological safety in isolation. Just try to sit just by yourself, talking to nobody and having total peace. I mean, maybe Jesus really meditated for 40 days and whatever, but we are not meant to be isolated from the crowd. And a
But
lot of these problems a lot of our traumas we got in relation to the other people in our childhood, in our life.
yeah,
And I think the way to heal those traumas are when we are with other people, not when we are alone. We need each other, like to reliably bring out healing and the best of each other to navigate this thing together.
that's a very confusing part of Western culture. Is like that individualism part. Uh, I recall being scolded quite a few times by my parents in a way that, but you're not everybody. But then on the flip side, but everybody's doing this, so you must conform. But you're an individualist, but you must conform. But it's like kind of that notion of individualism in Western culture is very, very confusing. That tribal nature does not really exist anymore in that sense. And it's very difficult for a lot of people, I believe, to belong, because even if you like you're part of a group, that you may be a part of a group, but there is, for example, at times no belonging. So that I envy you for in terms of the Eastern culture, because that's very different in all sorts of Asian cultures. The sense of belonging is completely different. The belonging to a culture, belonging to a family, belonging to nation, etc. That's a completely different notion. Whereas in the West, it's very like individualism, and then where is the belonging? No, I stand alone, and there is no belonging. And this also translates to how we look at IT. It's like it's always kind of standing in contradiction, where we should be standing in the cohesion. It's like looking at the the role of an architect at the moment. There are brilliant architects there, right? Every single one of them is speaking kind of a different language. They're kind of alone. They gather followers, but that's like that only. There's no belonging there. It's to that extent that the profession of an architect is the whole profession is having an identity crisis because we don't know who an architect is. There's so many titles. There's so many different roles of architects. It's like, who the hell is an architect? What does an architect do? You ask business architects, they're going to tell you a completely different thing. You ask infrastructure architects, they're going to tell you something completely different. The jokes that a group of architects is called an argument, it's spot on, right? The jokes that where you have four architects, you'll have five different opinions, spot on, because that identity is just like a humongous mess. There is no cohesion in there, right? People are literally naming themselves architects whether or not they have knowledge about the field, whether or not they actually do that profession. And now we're going to have probably a large group of people naming themselves architects because they jumped ship from software engineering because of agents, and now they're architecting agents. Yeah, well, again, crisis. What does that mean to architect anything, right? And we're just stumbling over words on and on and on and on with in this field, at least. That's what I'm noticing, that people have like a notion of an idea for what this is the role, and they make that craft their identity, the core, and then again, we're running straight into a wall of an identity crisis once again.
Yeah, I think on architecture, there has been some positive movement thanks to, like you mentioned, Mark Richards, Gregor Hoppe, Andrew Hammond Law, not least Martin Fowler, who defined, and Ralph Johnson, basically, the pretty I don't know how well known, but it's my go-to definition of what is an architecture. Architecture is about shared understanding of the important stuff, whatever that is. That is in Martin Fowler's "What is an Architect?" That I think it's a blog post many years ago. In that same post, he also said the impact of a software architecture of a software architect is inversely proportional to the number of decisions he or she makes. So already like a couple of decades, more than a couple of decades ago, I think it's either 2004 or something like that, there has been the awareness software. So architects role or mission is actually to facilitate that shared understanding and to have the intuition, above all, to say what is the important stuff we need shared understanding for. I mean, granted, a lot of things are not what I would just say. A lot of, for a lot of the software we do not need a top-notch architecture. And to use the DDD language, you know, you have the core domains and you have the supporting subdomains and you have the generic subdomains. Only your secret sauce, right? The part that is related to your core business logic, and being core, it has to change often, because if it doesn't change often, then it's not core. So if it changes often, you need to make it great code. It's not something you can one shot, at least not yet. So you need to make it evolve in an elegant way, and you need to have constant evolution, but that's only a very small subset of your software. I think also
Yeah,
being architects and being everybody today is about how do we be more strategic, yeah? How do we be really be more think about what part is the thing that I need to really use uh, my awake hours and my most awake brain power on, and the other some other things, AI can one shot it, or some things don't even change very often, then it doesn't need a great design. So a lot of the design thinking, no wonder. I mean, I feel kind of a little flattered, like when people keep talking about on LinkedIn and a lot of social media. Oh, now DDD, now domain-driven design is having a third coming, is having a blooming, and but what people are actually saying is that it's time for everyone to care about language and modeling. We need to
Indeed.
be specialist of the models that solve problems and realize opportunities rather than uh, 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 the people who are making instructions for machines. So code, the problem space part of the function of code rather than the solution space side. Although I think on the solution space side, we also need a more social approach. We can't just say, okay, this is the intent, go do it. And then as long as I have my test cases, it can come back. I have my PR. PR is not the same as pair programming. It's not the same
Hmm.
as you have when you have struggled with, the solution yourself. Should it be a separate class? Should we, is this does this function belong here, or should it be a separate bound context? I see a lot of cloud skills for identifying bounded contexts in the DDD space, and I think it's a little bit dangerous because that's what's
Yeah,
as soon as you get the neat and tidy bounded list of bounded contexts out. I mean, you probably have the same thing, what integration patterns, and if as long as you have a well argued solution out from the LLMs, some people can be overwhelmed by the fluency of the LLM and just, okay, this sounds so plausible, this sounds so well argued, it must be right. I don't have to think
yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
And they
So,
will not verify whether it's actually solving the problem from the problem space, right? Because it just looks so good.
yeah.
I'm
I,
amazed at times
I
at that.
think what you mentioned, what Gregor mentioned, but the structure versus behavior thing, for me, it's a call to action to say, to move our attention from the model of the what and the how to the, or maybe just the how, to the why and the what. What is the behavior? The behavior is really, what consequences does this piece of software, does this integration decision have for the users, for the people who are going to integrate
Exactly.
with this mess, whatever, right? So that is really, the behavior is the consequence, the behavior is the why. So whether we like it or not, it's time for us software professionals to love the why modeling, the modeling of the why. It's not the problem of the business people. And the business people, I've talked with so many product owners and coaches who are also afraid that their job is going to be, taken over by the developers who are basically prompting the LLMs, and giving them the context engineering and harness and whatever, right? So like you said, it's time to rethink belonging. What does real belonging look like? Is it handing over, some user stories? Is it talking together and really educating each other to speak the language of the why? Caring about behavior rather than structure.
And when I started exploring architecture broader than the integration platform, because there was this time I was just focused on integration platforms, not the broad aspect of architecture. And I read the books of Mark Richards and Neil Ford. I love how they uh, brought the laws of software architecture. They coined those laws. And the second law states explicitly why is more important than how.
How?
It's the
Yes.
second law of software architecture. And it's like, if you just remember that the why are we doing these things? Why are we making it? Why are we building this piece of software? What problem are we solving? So this is our why. That's the important part, not the how, not how we're going to solve it, because we can solve it in so many ways, right? But why we're solving this problem, why this is relevant, why this is important, and conveying that why. And I'm looking like at this point also looking at the aspects of my own work as a self-employed specialist teaching people. If I look into marketing, which is completely something foreign to me because I'm a very poor marketer. But looking at that, it's like people do not buy how, they buy why, they buy intent. They are convinced by intent, they are convinced by motivations. They understand motivations, the why. The how is a meaningless aspect. This is just a means to get somewhere. Some people make the how their why, and then they have a problem with that. And it's like it's really amazing in terms of observing that.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's, I mean, really, I think cognition is I mean, the question I'm asking myself when I hear you talk about this is, how did we become so? Yeah, how did some of
Ooh.
us? Right, I do not think it's a it's, some people just don't get it, and other people are doing DDD and doing whatever. I think it's really the way. Um, there was this guy, this cognitive scientist, psychologist called John Vervaeke. He has these four modes of knowing, and I don't know. I probably it's going. I'm going to introduce it poorly, but the four ways of knowing. It's the first one is propositional knowing. The second one is procedural knowing. The third one is perspectival knowing. The fourth one, which is what I want to mention most, is the participatory knowing. Yeah, I'm just sorry for this mess. It's just in my mind. I think I have to maybe build it a little bit up. So the propositional knowing. So it's kind of a taxonomy. It's very stringently built up. The propositional
Hmm.
knowing is basically about our semantic memory, like the truth. Like cats are mammals. If I ask you, are cats fishes? You would instinctually tell me, no, it's not. And where does that memory come from? You can't remember where you said in the classroom or wait, but that's a semantic memory. That's the abstraction layer in your head. That's the propositional knowing. And the
Hmm.
realness is tested by, is it true or false? We kind of know. Uh, and then you have the procedural knowing, and I think Michael Feathers talked about it at DDG Europe. It's kind of like learning to swim, like how to kiss a girl or a boy. Like it's kind of like riding a bike. It actually it's fascinating to read about. It actually physically and neurologically belongs to a different part of the brain called the procedural
Hmm.
memory. Like that part can still work if your
So,
propositional memory can get disrupted,
Shin,
right? Yeah.
perhaps I can give a visual aid for those more visually inclined. I found this. I don't know if it rings true,
Yeah.
uh, but
Yes.
I find it like it describes. Perhaps it describes it well enough.
Yes. But is that a signal for me to shut up? I just want to know.
No, no, just as a visual aid to what you're describing.
Okay, cool. So we are at the procedural. I think somebody probably made this. I'm pretty sure this is. Oh, it says built on the work of John Viveki, uh,
Yeah.
and and I think there might be. Yeah, so basically what I'm talking about, Viveki's own word is the last column, the first column, the last column, that's and the second last column as well. The rest of it
Mm.
is y- maybe a little
Interpretation.
interpretation. Yes, as I see it. Anyway, so with this visual, thanks for sharing this. The perspectival one is also very interesting. This is about, if I ask you, Carol, what happened at your last birthday, you would have a partial but vivid memory of being there. It's your experience. So
Yeah.
so it's kind of episodic, and the reason why it's real for you, we're talking about knowing, right? Epistemology is about, it's because you have been present, you were there, you give it
Yeah.
attention, which is different than from our cats, fishes, right? You don't know what,
But
it's
then
kind of
again,
abstractions, yeah. And
but then
then
again, we know that eyewitness testimonial is flawed because it's from a perspective, and that perspective and how we
precisely,
retain that presence is subjected to change based on who we are and how we perceive the world, right?
is it now the question is, how is it subject to change? How many people do you know that are unable to move away from their particular perspective? I'll just
I
let the
wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's a subject to change. It's a subject to interpretation,
okay, sorry, then I misheard you, but
individual interpretation.
the perspectival is something that it's kind of uh, the humans, it's a human thing. It because it we our unique life experiences give us the different perspectives, and then finally
Exactly.
that's the but perspectival is still like very head based, right? I'm taking a perspective. I'm looking at this from this
Yeah.
perspective, and some people listening to us might be saying, "Oh, I totally disagree. From my perspective, architecture looks like this, and identity looks like this, and what they're talking about is completely not true." So it requires a kind of presence from an angle, right? But the finally
Yes.
but the final thing is a participatory knowing, and that is where our sense of self comes from this body of theory. Uh, 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 Basically, the participatory knowing is when a person, me, and the reality, we're in a reciprocal, dynamically coupled position. And so, for instance, me and the room I'm in are both under the impact of gravity, right? The reason why we are both in this room is because somebody invented what's the a studio, a stream studio, and
Hmm.
at some time people started podcasting. There are so many things that had to happen for us to be together, but it's probably unconscious for us. We're not aware of it. We're just coupled together in this space and time. And a lot of times it's about what's been afforded to us, human beings, as points of action. And why I'm saying that is that participatory knowing is what uh, enables us to act on certain things and not act on certain things. Coming back to that question, how did we become so? I think it's because of the participatory knowing that has accompanied us from our childhood until now. Sometimes when in a meeting, what's afforded to the affordance in a meeting, a conversation that is afforded to you will be different from to an introvert. Maybe you are an introvert, but you're just pretending very well to be an extrovert. But anyway, so from what I'm saying is that the way we are coupled with the world, according to Viveka's theory, is having a lot of impact on how we're acting. And the actions that's made available to us in the world. And I think that the implication of that is to say, how can we intentionally work with the participatory knowing so we can reverse, we can revert some of the genetic or social programming that happened to us
Mm.
inadvertently. I think a lot of us
because
don't see that. Yeah.
because if I look at it from a perspective of let's say child development, the participatory knowing is the first thing we experience. It's literally the first way of learning about the world by just being in the, and then by observing. Kids, when they're very small, they observe us as adults and they just try to mimic us, and then it just yeah, procedural. By doing, they do what we do. They try to mimic our procedures, what we do, the exactly the same way. And then comes the abstract part of actually semantically knowing, learning by reading, learning by storytelling, learning by understanding those abstractions. It's very hard when kids are very small. It's very hard to explain to them, for example, the concept of time, the concept of a week, the concept of a day. These are very abstract terms. They don't get it because that's abstract. They're not yet equipped to handle abstractions. So basically, we're going from, as I mean, I as a parent, I tried to explain that to a 2 year old. Impossible.
Yeah.
That's just not possible at that age to deal with that propositional knowing, that semantic understanding of things, because these are abstract things. These are like, I've been really struggling as an adult. It's like my child is asking me about things that are abstract. How do I even explain the concept of that kind of abstraction to a kid when it's like it is really abstract? It's really difficult because this is not a day, a week. Well, a day is natural because we have the globe is spinning, but a week, a month, these are things that are completely abstract. A year, yeah, that's not abstract because that's one rotation around the sun. So that's fairly understandable. But the concept of time, the concept of 1 minute, 1 second, 1 hour, 24 hours, it's like, yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah, but it is. I mean, earlier on, this childhood thing, I think it's very much. You're spot on. The participatory knowing, it involves, the whole body. It involves emotions, and a lot of the times, I consider myself as a very self-reliant person. A part of that is because the way I got my parents' attention is is by doing things as perfect as possible, like trying to be. Uh, my need might be otherwise, but to belong, to get the parents' attention, I have to behave in a certain way, and a lot of times, who is it? I think it's Gabriel Marti, who said we have this attachment need, and then we have the authenticity need. And at childhood, these two things
hmm,
are often in contradiction. We want to be attached to our parents. We want, like, to be abandoned energetically and emotionally by a parents, to be ignored is not good for a child. It's simply not
mm-hmm,
acceptable. And sometimes I have to, as a child, suppress my own need. And this basically triples all the way up. So if in my upbringing I have the sense to please people by repressing my own need, so in a social conversation when I'm an adult, the perspective I'm going to take will not be it's safe to speak up, it's safe to be rebellious, and it's safe to challenge authorities, and it's safe to not to give a damn. So the participatory knowing earlier on enables or restrains what I am able to take as a perspective. And so the actions I'm taking. So, and also it limits what skills, what procedural skills it can activate, right? I am perhaps I have a very good analytical brain about architecture, but because of my fear of authority, I might not be want to bring that skill into the fore, and therefore all the nice abstractions in my head, they are equal to non-existing in that context. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
but in a way, we tend to see only the propositional knowing and not the all the other layers, which I think it's a shame, and which is what
But
I
they
work with.
influence the way we work. They influence the way we interact with our teams. They influence the way we interact with our company, with everything, really, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we tend to call that cultural differences. We tend to call that cultural programming, for example. So they scripts imprinted on us by our culture of upbringing, our household of upbringing, etc. They will influence how we behave in the workforce and how we convey our thinking, or do we even convey our thinking? Because we might not convey our thinking because of those perspectival knowing and participatory knowing that was part of our upbringing, right? And this then again pushes into an identity crisis, because then we are not able to express ourselves. We are holding ourselves back, and then who are we as specialists? Well, we may be good, but we're not seen as specialists. And then where's the value?
Mm. It,
We
it, it,
might think we are bringing impact, but we're not seen as value because we're sitting there silent in the room, just nodding along, doing our thing.
yeah, and this brings me to, I mean, I have this weird profile called sociotechnical architect, and a lot of people don't really understand what I do, right? Actually, a part of what I do is bring those four modes of knowing into realization in
Mm,
the corporate space. So one thing. So a lot of people, I think in our communities, systems thinking is a very well known concept. A lot of people consider themselves system thinkers, but one thing, even system thinkers tend to fall into traps is this. For instance, the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We tend to think the culture is wow, so many moving parts, and the relation system is complex relations, and it's not up to us to change it. Who am I? I'm just a small drop in the big ocean. Of course, it's the
mm.
culture. I can't change anything. Things have always been like that. Nothing can change. It's always been like this. It's the system. Uh, what can I do? And so, even systems
And
thinkers.
we lock ourselves in.
Yes, and I think that's very unfortunate. And one of the things I work with the sociotechnical systems thinking is really about this notion of autopoiesis, and auto means
Mm.
self. Uh, Poiesis comes from poetry, and poetry actually means creation. So it means a self-creating system. A system is self-creating. So if you and I, we are part of the system, then we, by definition, are part of the creation, the autopoiesis. So everything we do has an impact, even though it's only a small ripple. And a lot of people don't see it that way because we come from the mechanistic industrial age heritage. It's the managers. They make the strategies. They make the decisions. They make all the wrong call. Like this example you're saying, selling the call center, like outsourcing the call center to agents. What kind of stupid thing is that? I have nothing to do with this. Who am I, right? So it's just like by having this entitlement, consumers just like, oh, I'm just a consumer of all the others' decisions, and not I'm not having an impact. I think that's
We're becoming passive and powerless, basically, through that
Yes,
kind of way of thinking.
yes. And one other thing I tend to go and talk about at conferences and so forth, relation to sociotechnical architecture, is about conversational leadership. Everybody at every point in their career, in like, even if you're an introvert team member, you can call for a meeting, and if you don't understand
Hmm.
something, you can ask questions. um, these are all, I wouldn't say learnable skills, but I think it's far deeper than skill. It's at the participatory level. It's a awareness. It's a willingness to see myself as powerful and impactful, and having, and can make a
Able to
difference,
participate.
able to participate. Yes, and
Mm.
it's this reciprocity that the world, if we make the system, if we make the world, then we can as well also change. We can make it differently. So
Mm.
if the system is for us to make, we can choose to make it differently. So this is a lot of the, I work also a lot with Peter Block and the community part. So when you are part of the community, you have agency, right? You feel like a member, that you
Yeah.
can change something. So one of the things I think we can all ask ourselves is that, what can I do to convert this group I am part of to a team that have a shared goal? And further, from how can I convert what can I do to make my contribution so that my team works more like a community? The difference between team and community is that team works together to do stuff together. A community we care about certain things together. And I don't remember who said it, but one wise person said, the difference between machines and humans is that we humans, we care about things. And
Hmm.
one of the precondition for caring about things is because we can lose things. We can lose our youth. We can lose our roles. We can lose our impact. So that we can lose our, like, resources. Mom, we can lose our partner. We can lose our marriage. We can lose our health. A lot of things, and that makes us care. That makes us. AI doesn't experience loss, and therefore, even if it's say, well, I really care about you, it's not the same kind of care. The real care
No.
comes from the 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 capacity for processing loss. And in our culture, I think we need to also give ourselves time to grieve what we're losing. In liberating structure, which you probably know of, one of the new ones is called grief walking. And that basically is a way for us to process what we collectively are letting go of, like the coding craft, just like the maybe some of the
Mm.
earlier handcraft, like even beer making. In a lot of countries, like the small breweries, they're disappearing. Ice cream parlors, they're also disappearing. It's a loss for it's a loss for me. I love local breweries, but I mean, in Copenhagen, I think I have to really be conscious to find some breweries that can survive the commercial industrialization. That loss, we have to give ourselves to grief, because if we don't grieve that, we can't move on. We're still trying to block those emotions.
And that
Just
goes same for the profession.
yeah.
We're now losing something that we find intrinsically part of ourselves, part of our identity, well, part of our craft specifically. But for those who mistake craft for core, that's a big problem. That's a big grieving process that we're not enabling at any point, because now, okay, what are we going to do? We need to first, well, grieve that we lost that aspect of our work, and we're
Mm-mm.
losing it more and more because now it's just outsourced to a machine. and that's been part of the progression of technology. I don't know, ever since the invention of a wheel, I suppose. Right? There are aspects that we're going to be losing. There are professions that were completely eradicated by technology, but new professions were created by technology,
Yeah,
and there were people grieving in a very violent way about the loss of those professions, right? Protesting that we're not accepting the loss of said profession. It kind of is the same way, but not as violent and not more of an expression over social media, over rants, over uh, people being annoyed in the workplace. They're
yeah,
kind of grieving.
yes. And if you, I think we talked about, I briefly mentioned the difference between change and transition. And if you look for,
Hmm.
there's a very simple model. The person is called William Bridges, and he has the transition model. And it risks being like being interpreted as a linear model. It has these three phases like endings, transitions, and beginnings. The and if you look on Google, you probably could find a visual. It's a very it's kind of like three steps, but it's not. So basically, Pablo Picasso said, I think it's every act of creation is first an act of destruction, or in other words, any beginning. So to make an ending is to make sorry to make a beginning is to make an ending first. So we have to begin with the ending, and the grieving part basically is a reflective process to say what is it we're letting go of to make this transition an internal psychological social process for us all so that we have the
Mm,
capacity to imagine a new beginning. Because if we are in it's just like losing a parent. I lost my dad 3 years ago. The first year I was in denial. I don't want to, I didn't want to accept that he was not there anymore. But it also blocked my moving on, right? It's kind of that kind of energy. I
yeah,
think a lot of people don't see like a lot of my environment has a very pessimistic view about where humanity is going. I have young friends who don't want to have kids because they don't want their kids to face a 1984 kind of dystopic future. But I think that is we are where we are. If we want to imagine a new kind of future, we have to properly say goodbye to the old one. How
true.
all the good inventions and creations come from time of chaos. We are in a time of chaos at the moment, and the people who are making this transition uh, in a way that is beneficial to their internal developmental process, I think will come out from the other end with a more thriving and well-being and like a new beginning. And to make it more concrete, like why can't it be you? Why can't it be me to decide the model of the why, right? Because
Hmm.
why does it have to be somebody else? Can we imagine a future that we can have AI as a teammate and in a setting that we are like able to shift perspective, perspectival knowing? There are practices that enable the perspectival shift, paraphrasing each
Hmm.
other, understanding each other, rather than, I think, even in this podcast, if we're not really in attunement with each other, I could assume something that you have said, which is not really your perspective, which is actually my assumption. And
Indeed.
in how many of our conversations and team interactions, we assume what each other mean, and we don't ask that question. Do you just want me to shut up? Or, because we don't feel safe. And I think that transition needs to be facilitated. And we can all step into that role. Why does it have to be an architect or manager or facilitator, external consultant? Why can't it be you? It can be you that is the conversational leader tomorrow. It can
That's
start.
true.
Yeah. So
But then if we're looking at this, well, of course we're grieving and there are stages of grief to it. But just looking at our relationship to tech and how, for example, that relationship to tech was shaped by pop culture. It's like there's so many various approaches to AI in pop culture, especially those menacing where AI just takes over and starts killing people, right? But there are also perspectives in AI, which is, for example, you're a gamer. Do you know the Mass Effect series?
no.
It's a sci-fi RPG shooter kind of thing,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
right? In Mass Effect, in the original Mass Effect trilogy, AI is the main antagonist. And
Mm.
AI became alive, and AI is banned, and AI is killing people, right? In Mass Effect Andromeda, which is a completely different storyline, far away from the Milky Way in the Andromeda galaxy, AI is the collaborative power, the synergy of AI and a human being collaborating together to make to survive in Andromeda because they arrived in arcs and whatnot. Completely different story. Yet that story also explores all the fears of AI becoming that menace, that thing that is going to be the downfall of humanity. It's all about that perspective, and that perspective is imprinted on us by social media, by pop culture, by games, by video, and we're convinced that this is going that way from the perspective aspect, from something deeper in us than our the level that we're operating normally, because we're operating on the procedural and the propositional knowing, as you described that, right? So this is like on semantics, on what we learn and what we express. We express abstractions at work,
Yeah.
but our
And that's
beliefs are shaped deeper.
Yeah. So if I ask you which of the two roles would you rather be? Do you want to be a software engineer, or do you want to be a system designer?
Ooh, um, probably neither, because I
Well, it's
know that.
if I only give you two choices, like comparatively,
Okay,
which one do you like better?
comparatively, I like better system designer,
And what is the reason for that?
uh, because I find engineering being the easier part. Uh,
Mm,
to an extent, it's fun, but it's for me personally is the less fun part of software.
yeah. Yeah, I guess what I sort of hear you say is back to that how and why thing again, right? Software
Hmm.
engineering, it tells you, it's a engineering, it's kind of the metaphor, and what are you engineering is the software. And it doesn't tell you why you're doing that, but the system designer is kind of like you have an impact on the system by you are
Yeah,
designing a system with an intention. Yeah.
I'm looking into the problem space. I'm actually trying to understand what the problem is, how to solve it, and how to translate it into something that is technical.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Whereas software engineering is taking to how to build that, the how. The how is a fantastic and interesting problem space of its own. But from my perspective as an integration architect, I'm more interested in the why and the behavior and designing the interactions, designing that system in my terms, it's more of an ecosystem because I span across multiple domain systems, bounded contexts, and whatnot. But that is the why we interact, how we interact, uh, on the level of a human and on the level of an individual software systems, on the level of individual objects. That's the more interesting part for me. But there was a time in my career where that how was the software engineering aspect was a lot more interesting than the why. It's just that I grew out of it. It's no
Mm,
longer interesting because I know I can do it in multiple languages. So it's like it's proprietary at this point.
yeah.
It's not something that is for me is the key focus. But I'm having fun working with people that for them is the key focus. So I go and talk with them and have an interaction with them and explain and translate to what they comprehend and they can turn into software through software engineering. So I explain to them the concepts, I explain to them how those concepts relate to the tech that they're using, and then they go and figure out how to properly use that tech to actually build those concepts. Extremely fun. But for me, that software engineering part is just not fun enough anymore. That's
Yeah.
just it.
Yeah, and I'm actually quite curious how, like, I had a similar journey, right? So I'm quite curious how many of the, the people like us with the have a similar journey or have a similar cognitive and developmental journey
Mhm.
on that one, right? And that is my hope. And I also my a little bit of my fear. I fear that the software engineer era uh, is disappearing, is vanishing, whereas the uh, the um, the system designer era is barely beginning, and that's like the brave new work or the brave new world we are going into, because system is contextual and it's ambiguous and it's full of complexity, and it's not like it's my call to action to all software engineers is to think of themselves is to couple them, like, to use this the we're about to close, so the identity architecture, how do you architect your professional identity. I don't want to give any advice, but a self advice is to, I've done a lot of reflection. So I think what I've come to is that the future belongs to people who excels in relational knowledge. And what is
Mhm.
relational knowledge? That is the system design knowledge, as that what you and Philip are teaching. Integration in the extended sense in the sociotechnical system is to be intentional about my is to tighter my coupling to the world. And at the moment, I think a lot of including myself, is kind of like, I wish somebody could figure this out. Somebody could tell me what the target, what is the next step. I really wish that we could have this figured out uh, in 1 year or 2 years. But we may just have to let go of the old software engineer role without knowing what we are heading toward. That's what system thinking is. That's what complexity is. To let go and to fly from that cliff and to
Yeah.
discover in that
But
process that, yeah.
I will argue that you're saying software engineering is coming to some sort of an end. I would argue it's just evolving. Software development is coming to an end as a developer role, which means you get requirements, you code.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
definitely ending.
If that's the definition.
Software engineering, in my understanding of it, is not ending. It's evolving. It's going to be evolving from,
Correct.
well, if I'm a software architect, if I'm a solution architect, an integration architect, data architect, I'm working with those abstractions and this why and the problem space and whatnot, which requires all that lateral thinking. Software engineering requires more of that linear thinking to translate that into actual code structures. Now, will that involve a lot of code writing? In the future, probably less. That will involve a lot of understanding code and understanding what the hell is actually being implemented. What the hell is that AI actually giving me as code? And reviewing and building that understanding, building that cohesion in code with AI as a coding partner,
I
and
think
prompting that AI to spill it out and build it the way we want it to be built, and verifying that it's built. So this will require a lot of understanding and review work, which is going to make it extremely horrendous on all the juniors, because where will they gather that understanding of what is good code and what is bad code without programming, without actually doing the development work, right? So that's a different problem space altogether. How do we educate specialists to actually have that comprehension of code so they can be software engineers, not developers? But that is the role of a software engineer, to actually do that linear work of producing that code with or without AI to be actually structurally sound and workable, operable, maintainable, observable, auditable, etc.
I
But
guess
it's
I
that
guess I
linear aspect.
Yeah, I agree. I think I might have to modify. So it's not I don't mean software engineering as a thing is disappearing. It's mostly like uh the the human, primarily human executed uh software production is an era of the past. Like you said, you need to be able to know the basics to be at least at this current time. You still have to know that in order to be in the game, to do your harness engineering, to do your PR, and to actually do your heavy lifting at the end as reviewers. So that's I totally agree on that note. But I
Especially
also,
here,
yeah.
that going to one of the most quoted captions, and I really have it all the time in the studio just ready. IBM Training Manual 1979. A computer can never be held accountable, therefore a computer must never make a management decision. Now, if we adopt it to today's, an AI can never make a deployment decision, the structural decision, the final decision. But
Yeah,
to
but
make that decision, we need to have the capability to understand what it's spitting out and what it's actually building, and to be able to review it. And that makes it a lot harder cognitively.
yeah, and this recently on LinkedIn, I think there's maybe started by Alberto Brandolini, this notion about accountability, and
Mm.
I think accountability for me is emotionally loaded
Oh
sentiment.
yeah.
So you, if you don't care for something, how would you feel accountable? And take
Oh
real
yeah.
take ownership. And I mean, LLMs can feign that. They can say, "Oh, I care about this. I care about that," but they have no
Nope.
stakes, so they can't be really accountable. And so, if we are to be accountable on their behalf, we better care about that behavior. We better care about why the hell this is going. Well, this is being produced, right? So that's
And
I think it's even from a pure propositional point of view, that's an argument hard uh, to just thrust off. That accountability is a human thing, and maybe that's what our finally what differentiates us from the machines. That we can truly lose, we can truly grieve, and we can truly uh, be accountable and take that ownership.
and I think this is this is exactly why that why becomes even more relevant nowadays, because without understanding why we're doing things, we're not going to be able to create that accountability and care about that software and care about the problems we're solving with that software. Because
Yeah.
if we're just producing software without understanding the why, there is now no connection to be made to any emotion, because that understanding that why carries that emotional state that brings us to ownership, brings us to accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we didn't get to talk about the practices. I think there are set of people might be thinking, yeah, this is all true, but how do we, how do we actually practice this in a toxic culture? How do we, how do we,
Oof.
yeah, how do we even get the opportunity to get in the neighborhood of why in my company and that sort of thing? But we are at the top of the hour. I think we need to close after 2 hours, but it's been
We
really,
don't have to, but
yeah.
we don't have to, but I know that for you that might be at this point already a little bit exhausting, so that's
Yeah,
fine. But we can always come back to this as another session and actually talk about how to get to that why, how to find that why, how to create that engagement, how to create that accountability and sense of ownership, the will to take ownership, because that's a very important aspect of architecture right now. Because as architects, we cannot take ownership of everything. We have to translate from the business needs and wants to why is that relevant? Why are we building this software? And make that into something really useful. And I think that's going to be a broader topic on its own. So we can
yeah,
always come back to it with
for
a
sure.
next stream and actually talk about those mechanisms, how to create that why, relevance, and engagement.
And that is, yeah. So that is a very important aspect. But that was actually not what I was thinking about when I talked about practices.
Oh,
Well, that is actually quite an important one. Thanks for bringing that up. Uh, the practices I was thinking about is mostly the conversational and reflective practices that
mm-hmm.
you can say to navigate this transition together, and what can each individual do, and what can people in different roles of like software engineer, architects, agile coaches, product owners, middle managers, people that are like who feel that they want in some way be a system designer, and they want to
Mm,
experiment with some of these socio-technical practices in the very problem solving context of producing software, still in a way piggybacking the human discussions and the internal process onto the external problem solving. And there are in the adjacent communities in education, public sector, in the NGOs, there are even in the police and in security, there are so many practices and community building practices we can tap into without really being overwhelmed. So I think those practices, I'm personally very curious about it. And I'm whenever I have a chance, I try to smuggle that into a client space in those workshops. And I've really seen things moving like in the internal things moving, the participator knowing and the perspectival part start to
but
shift. Yeah.
Shin, I think that while your perspective is slightly from a different angle, we will be talking in that sense about the same thing. Because from my perspective of accountability, ownership, etc., your perspective of that internal transition, these all kind of go for the
For
way of
sure.
having having that why. And there are so many abstractions along the way where we could put in that design thinking, that systems design thinking, on so many different layers. There's so much space for that design right now, where we're lacking that design. We're just doing implicit work,
Yeah.
implicit architecture. A lot of the times, there's so much space to make it more explicit and more design that it's just like we can have plenty of aspects like that.
Yeah.
And I think this is that how to bring that into the workplace. I think that would be a great topic for a next session.
Yeah, for sure. There is a one question from Tong. I don't know you want to address that one. I think that's the only one that is the nature of a
This one,
question. The other, yeah, it starts with a question, so I'm assuming it's a
yeah.
question.
In the how why discussion, one could argue that AI is strongest at answering how, while the why remains a fundamentally human responsibility. Oh, I absolutely agree with the premise here. uh, AI is incapable of giving us the why because it's incapable of understanding our context fully. The amount of data we would have to siphon into a context window, I don't think any context window of any NLM would be able to grasp the amount of data and not hallucinate of our why for our business, why we do the business, why we do this particular processes in the business. All of this just going through abstraction layers down to what we're actually trying to solve in the how. uh, I don't think that AI will be able to help us with the why here at all.
Yeah, so I think it's correct. I would agree, Tang, that the why remains a fundamentally human responsibility. If you had swapped responsibility with activity, I would probably have disagreed a little bit. I think the why space, if we sort of paraphrase that into problem discovery or opportunity discovery, or a kind of a strategy session, we can totally involve AI to do our, to do the problem research, to analyze the adjacent spaces, and to explore the trends, and to spot signals, and all that sort of thing. But fundamentally, LLMs are based on past experiences, past practices, and the why is highly contextualized and highly future oriented. And so
Exactly.
so we can have a second opinion from the LLMs, but eventually the decision, the accountability, the responsibility, it has to be ours. And I think in the even in the DDD and the design community, there is a bit of a debate going on regarding the activity of why. What do we initiate the why workflow with? Do we involve the LLM brainstormers, and then let them be a equal uh, y- d- d- discovery partner from the very beginning? And for those developers I worked with in the bank, I would argue it's a poor strategy, because if you are not linguistically, like you are not a native English speaker, like I both of us, and if you are already struggling with expressing, letting a totally fluent entity giving you, like, oh, this is a research result and this is blah 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 blah, you're just like, oh my gosh, you have that feeling of synthetical consensus. Oh, it's
Mm.
overwhelming. So on that note, I think it differs. Where do you bring in the LLMs to be your discovery partner? That is my reflection for now.
But then again, in the discovery process, you also have a why for that discovery process that you're still responsible for as a human. So
Mm,
even that activity part, if you swap that responsibility with activity, that activity has its own why, and we're still responsible for the why for that activity in
yeah.
the design process as well. By the way, I don't know if you heard, but apparently Chinese is the most efficient language for LLMs token wise. So you actually have it better if you speak to an LLM in Chinese. And then apparently, I read that somewhere Polish language is the most precise language for an LLM to work with. Not exactly the most token efficient, but the most precise apparently. But that's just some snippets my brain picked up along the way, somewhere from various LinkedIn posts about that.
Yeah. Oh, it reminds me. I don't know if it's true that Chinese is the best language to but I had a
Token wise, apparently,
ah,
because parsing Chinese characters is very cheap token wise. So apparently, Chinese is the most effective token wise.
you know, in my family, we're all geeks, and my son and my husband, we're running LLMs locally. And the other day, we actually did an experiment, like
Okay.
writing in Chinese, among other things, to both English and Chinese models. Like, I can't say that to you in Chinese, so I'm gonna say it in English. Like, I want to get my car washed. In the place is only a couple of hundred
Oh, that one.
meters from me. Should I walk or should I take my car? And ChatGPT, you know, just give us the standard. There's pros and cons and blah blah blah. But considering totally didn't get the joke. But DeepSeek, all the Chinese models, they get the joke immediately. so, so it didn't even have to argue. Like I don't want to go into. I don't want to go there. I don't know if it's having anything to do with language, but it's so hilarious.
I would argue that's a context assumption, because the same thing is with the example, is 9.11 larger than 9.9, and depending on which context an LLM assumes, it will give you a different answer. If it assumes semantic versioning, it will say 911 is higher than 9.9. If it assumes a mathematical context, it will say the otherwise, right? But since you do not describe the context properly, and we as humans, we absolutely suck at describing context properly, then of course we get varied answers, and this is where all the fun answers from LLMs occur. Not because they're wrong, it's because we describe the context poorly. And that's the usual human condition in working with LLMs and working with one another. We assume context, we do not explicitly express context.
Yeah, for sure. This is so fun. And there's a comment, I don't know how to say this, but there is the AI doesn't experience loss and real care comes from the capacity for processing loss. And I just want to mention a real experience. Like, I have a friend working as a change facilitator for a Brazilian bank who has just been, which has just been reorged. And AI obviously played a role. And the way they actually use the transition model and the liberating structure called grief walking to to facilitate this process for the bank employees to process the reorg and to process the obviously also the layoffs, and yeah, I can't tell the story the way she told it, but it's just amazing that people think this is just ooh ooh kind of stuff, but we all have grief to process and in our workspace. So I can only encourage you guys to check out the liberating structure. One of the 10 new ones is called grief walking, and yeah, it's readily available. um, all right, so
It is, just for the context, to make it quick for people, this is the QR code for grief walking from Liberating Structures. If you want to take a look, that's right there, and
yeah,
it explains all the aspects. It's quite a long page
yeah, and if you are
explaining everything.
in Germany, like if you're in Munich in February, you're gonna do grief walking. You can come and do grief walking with me at OOP.
Ooh, all right.
Okay.
Before we go off, a few announcements. As always, next week we're having another loosely coupled session. This time with Hannes Lovette, a principal consultant at Access from Belgium, I believe. The company is from Belgium, and we're talking about career leadership in IT because Hannes is quite involved in career leadership and learning at his company. So that's going to be a different angle. Probably we're going to talk about AI and the role of an architect as well, to some extent. So that's obviously next week. Oh well, I forgot one thing. Change the slide. Of course, QR codes. Sorry about that. Upcoming events, you can always look up the calendar at Bridging the Gap EU.com. There's a QR for that. We're running our strategic integration design with DDD with Philip Costera at avanscoperta.it, but also available at DDD Academy again. That's in Avanscoperta, it's in November. In DDD Academy, it's December. If we run out of space on Avanscoperta, and of course, if you will, subscribe to the YouTube channel to get notified by all the other live streams and whatever other media will finally maybe start producing. That said, Jin, thank you so much for joining and having a conversation. Hope to have you back again. By the way, this is your second time, for those who don't know, because you joined at loosely coupled at DDD Europe live from the conference. Hopefully we can have another conversation, another session on those practices, how to facilitate for the transition and whatnot. Well, good night, everybody.
Or good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Or good afternoon, yeah.
Yeah.